if you like threw your phone across the room because you got something wrong on the grid, I might be to blame. Hi, I'm Adam Darowski, Executive Director of Design at Sports Reference, and I'm on the team that builds and designs all of the Immaculate Grids. Today, I'm going to give you a peek behind the curtain, how we build the grids. How has the grid creation process changed over the last 2 years? Well, when we first purchased Immaculate Grid, we were scheduling grids on paper, if you can believe that. So I would literally print out the standings, print out some paper grids, and start mapping like, okay, who haven't I used? You know, what two teams work well together? What categories work well together? Over time, we've built some tools to make that process a lot easier. How do you decide which team's stats or milestones to feature on a given day's grid? You know, every single grid is handcrafted. People might think that it's just you push a button and it's created, but I'm building them all from scratch. So I usually start with teams that I haven't used in a while because I want to make sure I cycle through those teams and you know, not leave any like Astros or Padres fans mad at me for not using them. Then I find some good teams that cross those other teams I just picked that haven't been used in a while too. So it's got to be a team that, you know, I haven't used in the last few days as well when pairing those. And then I like to pick some stats and milestones to fill out the grid because the variety is good to have a little bit of each in every single grid. Although if you play baseball on Saturdays, you'll know we use all stats on Saturday. How do you decide when to add new categories? So we add new categories periodically when we find something that really, really makes a good category. And a good category has a few different ingredients. One of them is that a lot of different players will work. And that's because people love, you know, pulling for rarity, but it also allows people to pick the players that they like from their era. So a great category will have players that work from, you know, the 50s or 60s, or from the 80s when they were growing up, or modern fans will be able to use modern players today. How do you strike the balance between making it challenging, but not impossible? On the baseball side of things, I tend to like categories that have at least 10 or so answers, sometimes hundreds, so that people have a lot of different players they can choose from. Every once in a while, if it's like an MVP for a team, we're going to drop into the single digits. But, you know, always on baseball, there's typically always going to be at least one player that you'll recognize. Do you have a go-to category that you like to include when making grids? I cycle through the different categories quite often, just like with the teams, but there are a couple categories that I like to reuse a little bit more often because there are a lot of different options or there are a lot of famous players that people can use, and also dig into some deep cuts. And that's All-Star and Hall of Fame. So those I use a little bit more often because people know the Hall of Famers, but they might also know, oh, you know, Ted Simmons played for the Braves or something like that, where they can get a little bit of a deeper cut. An All-Star, you know, the All-Star game's been around for almost 100 years now, and players always have an All-Star every year. So you can literally pick anybody from any era. Do you have a favorite grid you've ever made? Well, to be honest, I think the most recent April Fool's Day grid, where we just opened it up to naming any player that ever played in Major League history in any of the cells, was one of my favorites as well, and people really responded well to that. But on a personal level, I'm a Negro Leagues researcher and a Latin American baseball researcher, so a couple times I've used the intersection of played in the Major Negro Leagues with born outside the USA, and that can be a really tricky one that, you know, Mini Mignoso is usually the top answer, and I love Mini Mignoso, but it also gives people an opportunity to learn about some of the players outside of the USA who played in the Negro Leagues. And I think that's one of the cool things about the grid. It's also an opportunity to learn. Thanks for taking the time to remember some guys with us. Be sure to subscribe to the Sports Reference YouTube channel and let us know your grid ideas in the comments below.